In 2014, Laverne Cox said that misgendering trans people is an act of violence, because I would argue that sex needs to go through the same change that gender has already gone through. It's not a static fact, it's a social construct. Think about it for a second. Okay, got your answer? Well, if you said no, I'm sorry, but that's pretty discriminatory. However, in an effort to fight violence worldwide, this is the definition that the WHO came up with, and it explicitly includes non-physical forms of violence. They say non-physical forms of violence. And if you were to say that this video is a part of my feminism,
What's up, guys? It's the Actual Justice Warrior here, and today we're taking on one of the worst content creators on YouTube,
Riley J. Dennis.
Like most SJWs, Riley took the Trump election a little hard.
It's the day after the election. I just woke up. It makes me so sad because I know there's nothing I can do about it.
Now, it's perfectly fine to be upset when your candidate loses, and considering I'm not a Donald Trump supporter either, I didn't really want him to win, but then again, I didn't want Hillary to win. So RJ decided to make a video about how Trump is infringing on the free press, and how Trump supporters, and more accurately, people who attack Riley, are the ones who actually don't care about the First Amendment. This is what we're going to debunk today.
It's no secret that Trump hates the media. In February alone, he's tweeted disparaging things about them about 20 times.
Oh my god, Donald Trump tweeted bad things about the media? Holy fuck. Hitler rising. Just wait on the Hitler analogy, we all know it's coming.
Everything is fake news except information that comes directly from him or Fox News. That would almost be funny if it wasn't terrifying.
No, it's still pretty funny. Look, I don't like the fact that Donald Trump labels everything, polls, or negative coverage fake news, but he's not the one who came up with the fake news meme. Your candidate came up with the fake news meme.
So-called fake news can have real-world consequences. It's a danger that must be addressed, and addressed quickly. Bipartisan legislation is making its way through Congress to boost the government's response to foreign propaganda, and Silicon Valley is starting to grapple with the challenge and threat of fake news.
The Democrats refused to acknowledge that Hillary Clinton was one of the worst candidates in American history, so one of the excuses that they made up was this rampant spread of fake news. And because the media hated Donald Trump with a passion, he was easily able to point to all these ridiculously overstated stories about him and call them fake news. Hillary Clinton and the Democrats created the fake news excuse. Donald Trump just took it away from them. So if you want to blame somebody, once again, blame Hillary Clinton.
Oddly enough, Trump supporters tend to claim to be huge supporters of the First Amendment. They often call themselves free speech advocates and cry when someone blocks them on Twitter or doesn't pay them to speak at their university.
Riley, you blocking people on Twitter is not an infringement of somebody's First Amendment rights. People who criticize you for doing that are criticizing you for being a bitch that's afraid of debate. They're not criticizing you for violating their First Amendment right. And if they are, then they're pretty dumb. However, your second point about the riots that happened outside of a Milo Yiannopoulos event at UC Berkeley couldn't be more wrong. UC Berkeley receives over half of its funding from the federal government. Since all appropriations bills must originate from the House, they come from the Congress. So if UC Berkeley is using federal funding to discriminate against certain viewpoints, which in reality is conservative viewpoints, then that is a violation of the First Amendment. Public universities have no right to censor their students because, in effect, that is Congress funding a censorship arm. So you couldn't be more wrong about that point.
But what it does say is that Congress can't make a law abridging the freedom of the press. So far under Trump, Congress hasn't done that. But with a president who actually calls the press the enemy of the people, it's not too far-fetched to imagine that they would.
I don't like Donald Trump referring to the press as the enemy of the American people. I find that rhetoric to be very totalitarian. However, at least Donald Trump is just throwing words at people. Barack Obama prosecuted journalists. Barack Obama, President Hope and Change, wiretapped the Associated Press. He went after James Rosen of Fox News. He used the Espionage Act more times than all other presidents combined. Barack Obama attacked the First Amendment like no other. And where was Riley on that? Guess how many videos freedom of the press advocate Riley J. Dennis made on that?
Think about it for a second. Okay, got your answer?
0. Why? Because a partisan hack doesn't care about policy. When Barack Obama was doing unprecedented things to the American press, that's hope and change. That's all good. But when Donald Trump says negative things about the press, then we all need to be scared. It's ridiculous.
In the past, when people have leaked government secrets, they've been punished for it.
Punished by who, Riley?
His administration has already been taking whatever steps it can to impede the free press. At a briefing on February 24th, Trump barred prominent news organizations like the BBC, Politico, CNN, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and BuzzFeed News.
Okay, so BuzzFeed News is the organization that printed the unconfirmable information from that Russian dossier. They literally did a fake news report against Donald Trump, an unverified news report against the president because he's President Trump. They would have never printed unsubstantiated rumors against Barack Obama. Number two, this is not impeding the press. Not inviting certain media outlets is a dick move, and it's a bitch move if I'm being perfectly honest. I think Donald Trump is a bitch for doing that. But it's not restricting the press's ability to write stories or go on TV and criticize him. If he did something like that, like President Obama, then we would have a conversation. But to pretend that there isn't always some limitation on what outlets can come in and what outlets can't is ridiculous. You don't let the local newspaper from Minnesota into the White House press briefing. I'm sorry to call out Minnesota like that, but there are a lot of popular online media outlets that don't get a chance to get in with the president. The president doesn't have to talk to you to protect the freedom of the press. The president just has to not restrict you.
Because the way Trump discusses the media is very dictatorial. Hitler's Nazi regime used the term Lügenpresse, or lying press, to discredit any media organizations that criticize them.
And there we have it, the obligatory Hitler reference. Because Hitler called the press a lying press, and Donald Trump calls them a lying press, therefore they're the same thing. You do realize that every administration has accused the press of lying. Barack Obama tried to bar Fox News from certain events because he said they weren't a real outlet. I'm not saying Fox News isn't an incredibly biased news outlet, but again, if it's not Hitler when Obama does it, why is it Hitler when Trump does it? Look, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump saying that you can only get information from him, but to pretend that he's doing something extraordinary when he isn't is ridiculous. A lot of it Trump brings on himself by the way he talks about things. He is definitely the worst on the press in terms of rhetoric. However, in terms of action, President Obama was far more restrictive on the press than any other president. And Hillary Clinton, the candidate that Trump was running against, was even worse than him. Hillary Clinton actually suggested bombing Julian Assange of WikiLeaks because WikiLeaks was leaking negative information about her. Hillary Clinton has a long history of censorship, and remember, she didn't do a press conference for like 270 days in the middle of a presidential campaign. While the last one is her not talking to the press, and I've already said not talking to certain outlets isn't a restriction on the press, remember, that's no different from what Donald Trump is doing right now. He's refusing to deal with certain outlets, which is a bitch move, but all presidents do that to some degree. The biggest problem I have with this video is the hypocrisy in it. Riley never called out Barack Obama for all the things that I previously listed. Riley endorsed Hillary Clinton despite her staunch opposition to First Amendment freedoms.
The more I've looked into it, the more I think Hillary actually would be a genuinely good president and not just the lesser of two evils. And
RJ advocates for restrictions on speech all the time. RJ believes that misgendering somebody, simply not using their pronouns, is an act of violence.
Intentionally misgendering trans people is an act of violence, and
if it's an act of violence, like in New York, you can be fined for it. You can be arrested for it. And by logical extension, you can possibly be killed for it, because if you keep committing violence, then you're a dangerous threat and you have to respond to that violence with violence. RJ is an advocate for the idea that words that hurt people's feelings are violence. RJ is counter to the First Amendment. RJ does not believe in freedom of speech. So for Riley to make this video is absolutely insane.
And it's hypocritical as fuck.
Donald Trump is not perfect, and we should criticize the way he deals with the media, but people in glass houses shouldn't throw hard stuff. And if you're one of those people that agrees with Riley that violence is an okay response to speech, then shut the fuck up. Because what you're really upset about is not that Trump is restricting freedom of speech. What you're upset about is he's not restricting the speech that you don't like. If you like this video, then please hit that like button. If you want to see more content, click subscribe. Follow me on all my social medias. This has been the Actual Justice Warrior. Until next time.